So yes, people, and welcome back to another episode of the Ghostoul Podcast. Firstly, happy Halloween, and boy, have we got an awesome show today. This week's guest is the nation's favourite parapsychologist. We have Dr. Ciaran O'Keeffe.
Hello. How are you?
Yes, mate, you're good. How are you, sir? How are you?
All right. Happy Halloween, indeed.
Yes.
Favourite time of year.
It is, yeah. This is when we get to come out and play.
Exactly. Yeah, so nobody looks weirdly at us.
No, it's like this the normal thing for a month.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's brilliant. Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, and yeah, it's been a long time, very long time.
It has. Yeah.
Many years.
It just shows how long we've been in the business, doesn't it, really?
Definitely, yeah. All them years ago. I had hair then as well. So, for those people that are watching and listening that don't know who you are, Ciaran, could you just give us a little rundown and of what you do? That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So, I'm a parapsychologist employed at Buckinghamshire University. Well, I'm actually more than that. I'm an applied psychologist, which means that I have an interest and speciality in parapsychology, which is scientific study of the paranormal. But also I'm an investigative psychologist, which is somebody who's qualified in psychological assistance for criminal investigations. So stuff like psychological profiling, hostage negotiation, detective decision making, that sort of thing. But the stuff that I love, and the reason why I'm here, is the parapsychology stuff. So being employed at university, I do research and lecturing on parapsychology, but also, as you well know, because we've talked about this loads, I am also a ghost hunter or ghostbuster. Always love to be called a ghostbuster, but yeah, ghost hunter. So I'll do scientific lab-based research, but I'll also love to be out in haunted locations and looking for ghosts.
Yeah. So what got you started in the paranormal? Did you see a spirit at the end of your bed when you were small, or was it TV shows, or what sparked your interest?
Yeah, that's always the typical story, isn't it? People talking about a spirit at the end of the bed. No, it wasn't the case for me at all. I think there are a number of different things, and there was a huge turning point, but a number of different things, including as a boy being fascinated by ghost stories, even at a very young age, to the point where my parents were genuinely concerned about my reading habits. Stuff like English authors like James Herbert, M.R. James, but also horror novelist H.P. Lovecraft, Clive Barker, some Stephen King short stories, and this is under the age of 10, bear in mind. So it was a very young age, but fascinated by it. So that kind of laid the seed. But also, I remember doing my first ghost hunt at about the age of 6. There was an abandoned, burnt-out pig farm down the end of the lane. I lived in a cul-de-sac at the time in Norfolk, and there was a story about a ghost associated with that pig farm, and us brave 6-year-olds stayed up late one night till 7 o'clock or whatever it was. It seems really late now, but back then, but it's not now. But we went down on a ghost hunt of this abandoned pig farm, and all we discovered was a wasp's nest, and disturbed a wasp's nest, and came back crying with stings all over us. And that could have put me off for life, but it didn't. Like I said, I was just fascinated with ghost stories, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, grew up with that. And then at the age of 13, the movie Ghostbusters came out. And that was it. I think I was sold from that moment. I even called up Columbia University, that's featured in the movie, and asked about their parapsychology unit. And the lady at the end of the phone had obviously been asked this loads of times. She said, it's just a movie. Come on, it's just a movie, she said. And I was like, well, I'm really sorry. And I think she might have, heard the disappointment in my voice, and maybe I caught her on a good day. But she directed me to the Institute of Parapsychology and said, look, if you're interested in this stuff, contact these guys at the Institute and maybe they can help you with your interest and that sort of thing. And that continued my interest up until I was 18, 19, and ended up going to the States and studying in America and actually studying at the Institute of Parapsychology as well as part of my degree.
That's crazy.
And yeah, really just that's my journey. So, when you ask me what got me interested in this, it's a combination of a burnt out pig farm, wasps, ghost stories, and Ghostbusters. That's what did it.
That's not one that I've heard before, so that's brilliant. I love that. So you obviously love Ghostbusters. If you could be one of the Ghostbusters, who would it be? Which one would you want to be?
This is a great question, and this really shows my age, because up until about 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said Venkman, 100% Peter Venkman, because he was the coolest, laid back one. Yeah. So I was always kind of modelling myself and thinking that's who I would love to be. But over the years, then become wiser, and like I said, whilst I always had that boyhood dream of being another Dr. Venkman, I think I then moved over to the Harold Ramis character, and Spengler would be now the person that I most identify with. And I genuinely, in a bizarre way, I do genuinely identify with him, especially if you've watched Ghostbusters 2 and you see him doing the lab work as well.
Yeah.
I feel like I am more like Spengler anyway, because I'm a parapsychologist doing lab work at a university, but also I'm out ghost busting as well, and that's really Spengler to a T. So yeah, I think I identify more with him now, even though I'd like to be the cool Venkman.
No, I think that's a good choice. Yeah, Venkman's got many flaws. And,
he does. Even as a Ghostbuster, he genuinely does have
exactly
many flaws, doesn't he? Yes. Let's not even talk about ethics, but also his style of investigation is not the best.
No, even Ray is okay. Ray's better than Peter Venkman. So
that's true. That's true.
So you say you love being a Ghostbuster, going out ghost hunting.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a ghost? Forget your skeptical side, your parapsychological side. Have you ever? Well, you think you've possibly seen a ghost?
No, 100% not. No, I have never seen a ghost myself personally. I've been presented with loads of evidence, so loads of photos, loads of videos that people have provided where they've said, "Oh, this is a ghost." So I've seen it in that respect. Other people showing their evidence. So, I would say no, I never have. However, there have been a few instances where people have shared their accounts with me, and I have been, I guess, more convinced by their accounts than others. And let me give you a good example, and you'll see why I'm saying this, because even though I haven't had that personal ghostly encounter yet, or at least an apparition encounter, I'll talk about other encounters in a minute, but I haven't had an apparition encounter. My wife Anna and I were in Battery Mirus, which is a Second World War German bunker on the Channel Islands and Guernsey, and it was just the two of us locked into that bunker. Basically, we were recceing it. We're looking at it for the possibility of doing a later investigation, maybe filming it, but also my wife worked for charities at the time. We was looking at venues to do charity ghost hunts, this sort of thing. But basically we had locked ourselves in there so that nobody else could come in.
Yeah.
And I went off into the deepest dark depths of this horrible looking place. I mean, there was no light. You just walked through these tunnels, and when you think about the sort of people that were there, it's just a nasty, nasty place. But I went off on my own with a camera to film what I was looking at. And after about 10-15 minutes, I heard Anna shouting out, "Ciaran, Ciaran!" So I ran back to her. And bear in mind, the the rabbit warren that is this place, it took me a good 5 minutes to get back to where she was. And she was completely white as a sheet. She was just visibly shaken, just, yeah, really,
Wow.
really upset. And I said, well, what happened? And she had been sitting round the corner. She didn't want to come into the dark part, but she'd been sitting round the corner, and she heard footsteps coming along the tunnel towards her, the exit tunnel towards her, which is where I would have walked to get back to her.
Yeah.
And of course she went, Ciaran, and the footsteps stopped. And then she said, Ciaran, and she heard them turn, in the gravel and start walking the other way. She jumped up, looked round, there was nothing there. And that's when she completely lost it and shouted out my name. Was genuinely scared. And like I said, it took me a good 5 minutes to be able to run back to where she was.
Yeah.
Now, she hadn't seen an apparition, but I think this is at the heart of why I'm fascinated by ghost stories and people's experiences. There's an example of somebody that I trust and, have no reason to doubt.
No.
That's what she heard. And I could see, because I knew her very well, I could see how much she was affected by it, to the extent where she didn't want to stay. And it's those sorts of experiences, I think, that are the most fascinating. There's another one at a haunted prison that I investigated, where a prison officer had turned up. It was a public ghost hunt, and a prison officer had turned up with his girlfriend, and he was just being all, there's nothing to this stuff, wasn't interested at all. He was there because it was an old prison. Actually, this is prison there, Oxford Castle.
I love that place.
He was there because it was a prison, and he just wanted to see it. He'd never seen the inside of it. He was just interested in it from a prison officer. But his girlfriend was interested in the ghost stuff. He said, I'm not really here for the ghost stuff. Halfway through the night, we gave them a supervised 30-minute break where they could walk around the place, and we had investigators based at every floor. And on one particular floor, there's all the prison cells, and you walk to the end, and there's a small tower with other cells, or at least looks like cells in it. After about 5-10 minutes of this period, these two came running back along the cells, actually the corridor that's in my background. They came running along the background out of the castle, like literally just bolting out. And we're like, what's going on? And again, they were both that same visibly shaken up, like genuinely scared. And they said, we're going, we've seen something and we just want to go. We don't want to stay. Bear in mind, there was another 3 or 4 hours on this ghost hunt that they paid for. And they genuinely wanted to go. And we had to calm them down and say, well, just calm down a second. It would be wrong of us to let you go whilst you're in this scared state and drive off. Let me get you a cup of tea, anything you want to drink, just sit down, talk to us. And eventually they calmed down and explained what had happened. They walked into that tower, and they were just standing there kind of looking around, and they said, we both suddenly froze, and in the far part of the tower we saw a guy sitting on the floor with his hand slowly scratching the wall, just scratching and pawing at the wall. And we both looked, and he turned to his girlfriend as if to go, can you see that? And he said, and I could see that she was looking at the same thing, and both horrified. And we looked at each other and just ran out. And he said, I don't believe in this. I do not believe in this. And he said, for me, I have no idea what to do now. He said, I genuinely don't know what to do. How could I have seen that? What was that? And I think that's the lovely thing when you hear some people's experiences, is you get immersed in their experiences when they genuinely are affected by it. It's had a real impact on them. And that's what I mean. I don't want yourself or people watching this to be disappointed that the great Dr. Ciaran O'Keeffe has never seen a ghost and therefore it's all rubbish. No, I'm equally fascinated by, even though I haven't had an apparitional experience, I'm fascinated by the fact that out there people appear to be having genuine experiences, and we still don't understand it. So
So would you?
maybe towards the end of this, I can talk about the experience I have had, which is
Yeah.
not an apparitional experience, but it was a spooky one.
Okay, we'll come back to that. So obviously, people know you as a skeptic, but are you actually a believer? Like the way you're talking, you're very passionate about listening to the stories, interacting with people that have had experiences. Is it just like the skeptical side is like your professional side, and are you secretly a believer, or which
No, I
way are
think
you?
it's a really good question again, Mickey. I think it comes from, there's two parts to it. It comes from a media portrayal of me as a skeptic, which is actually not a skeptic, it's a cynic.
Yeah,
That's really how I'm being portrayed. You know, somebody that doesn't believe in this stuff and is always trying to explain it away. And that is, you know, if you're cynical, you're closed-minded. You're just not interested in hearing anything else. It's the same as the other end of the spectrum of belief, which is dogmatic, where again, you believe in it so much, you're
yeah,
blinkered, you don't want to hear
yeah, yeah.
what anybody else has to say. I'm not a cynic, I'm a skeptic, and I'm even a skeptic in ghost hunting as well. But skeptic actually means open-minded but questioning. And if you explain that to people, I think most ghost hunters are skeptics. They're
There should be.
open-minded to the
Yeah.
possibility and they're questioning, you know. And I think that's the way to be. And I always explain it another way with colleagues in psychology and colleagues at the various universities when they go, oh, you know, I don't know why you're involved in this stuff. It's all a bit of fun, isn't it? You know, people just hallucinating or making it up. And I'm going, well, no, you can't say that. You're being dismissive of experiences that people have had for centuries, for as long as human beings have told stories, but also you're dismissive of experiences that thousands upon thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people have had. So in a way, there's a scientific obligation for us to understand what's going on. Even if understanding what's going on is getting evidence for the psychology of it, that's one understanding, or getting evidence of something genuinely paranormal. But either way, you're not ignoring it. I think it's arrogant of scientists just to dismiss it all and say it's all down to hallucination and people making it up or lying. I think we've got to acknowledge the impact on people of those experiences and the fact that some people are having genuine experiences. In other cases, some people are having experiences that are easily explained, but there are also those scratching head moments as well, where you kind of go, oh, maybe there's something there. And that's the frustration and also where the passion comes from. Ghost hunting and people's ghostly experiences are spontaneous. You can't predict what's going to happen. Even in those locations where there's such regularity with the appearances, you can't predict what's going to happen. And because you can't predict it, when people have it, that moment's gone. You can only speculate about what happened. You can't go back necessarily and measure the exact circumstances.
No.
You can't measure somebody's brain. You can't measure the environment. You can take a good guess. You know, if you're looking at somebody's mental state or if you're looking at the environment, as you know, as they're talking about the experience, you can take a good guess, but you can't go back 5 minutes or 10 minutes or a week or a year or 6 months and actually assess what was going on in that environment or in their head at that particular moment. And that's, for me, the most frustrating element of what we're looking at in terms of ghost hunting when we're talking to people about their experiences. That's a frustrating part, but it's also the part that makes it the most interesting.
It's very
Because you
much in
just
the
don't know.
moment, isn't it?
Yeah, big
Yeah.
time. You know, and even as ghost hunters, if you're ghost hunting, you can't predict when something's going to happen.
No.
You know, that's the other thing. You know, it's not just about hearing people's experiences. It's about actually being in the locations and ghost hunting And like I said, I think that's the most frustrating part, is that you cannot predict when something is going to happen. Where there's a noise or somebody's affected or somebody sees something, you can't predict it. And that's frustrating, but it's also a lovely golden nugget situation of going, oh, there's something interesting, you know. And also I love that detective work as well, about finding out what might be going on. I find that equally interesting as well, as a skeptic.
Do you think science will ever confirm the existence of ghosts or spirits?
If I had the answer to that, then I'd be a rich man. But also I'd be precognitive. I'd be able to predict the future. I don't think we necessarily will. And it's a bizarre thing for me to say. I don't want us to.
No, it's like it's special. We're meant to know when we die, when we pass over. And if this magical thing happens, when we see our family, etc., friends that have passed,
yeah,
that is when we are supposed to find out.
Exactly. And even you're right. And even if, let's say, the alternative, which is that I continue to do research and others who I work with in the scientific field continue to do research around the psychological and environmental explanations for what's going on, and we find definitive proof. Actually, proof is the wrong word in science. We find definitive evidence that a certain aspect of psychology or a certain aspect of the environment explains ghostly experiences. Even if we did that, people would still have ghostly experiences. And the reason why is the same reason why it happens now. There's some very good explanations for some ghostly experiences now, but people can listen to those, but it's not convincing them of the reason for their own ghostly experience.
No.
Do you see what I mean? So,
yeah.
So, if science could explain it from a natural perspective, psychology, environment, I think that's great, but I don't think people would be convinced by it. Also, there's the potential when you then look at ghostly experiences and ghost hunting, you're then taking almost like that magic and that mystery out of it by explaining it all away. But then also, like you said, if you were to explain it fully from a supernatural perspective, or using, new laws in physics, for example, then there's still that mystery element that's taken away, which is why I said, exactly like you're saying, I don't think it would be the right thing for us to find the answer.
No. I mean, they do say that a lot of people's experiences are all in their head. Like, psychology can explain that. And I suppose if you see things, there's certain things happen in your mind, what you're thinking about, things that would happen to yourself when in the moment you are seeing, say you heard a voice, you saw a figure walk in and then they vanished. I mean, there's always that side of it that can explain like the sort of environment you were in for your brain to act that way, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that the beguiling thing and the interesting thing is that even when you have environmental explanations for what's going on, so say, for example, and there's a lot of talk recently about black mold, for example, as a good environmental explanation for people's experiences. Knowing that explanation does not take away from the fact that somebody can be sitting in a chair in their sitting room and see a ghost. The power and the impact of actually seeing that, there's no amount of explanation I could potentially give to that person to say, oh, it's to do with black mold, that'll take away the fact from them that no, Ciaran, you can't explain that. That's not black mold. I genuinely saw a figure standing in front of me. And that's what I mean, is that there's some really, really good explanations, but I think it's very difficult for people that have ghostly experiences for eyewitnesses sometimes. I think when you have it regularly and maybe as ghost hunters, you're having regular experiences, or other people have regular experiences, you kind of get used to it. But I think that impactful initial experience can be very, very difficult, and it can be psychologically quite impactful. There's a guy, Steve Volk, who wrote Ghostwatch. Yeah, amazing guy. He educated me actually a few months ago about the TV critic or film critic Todorov, this guy Todorov, and he came up with an interesting theory about the impact of ghostly experiences on people. He said that the moment you have your first encounter with a ghost, that creates a conflict in your head. And the reason why is because if you see that ghost, on the one hand, you're thinking, this now changes the world for me.
Yeah,
completely.
Ghosts exist. Yeah.
Ghosts exist. Everything else pretty much is out the window now. I just, it changes my worldview. It changes my view of the afterlife. It changes my view of everything. So I've got that going on. The other part of me is going, am I going mad? Is there something wrong with me? And in that instant you see a ghost, both of those things are swimming around in your head going, what is going on? And that creates this interesting conflict, and this difficult conflict that can happen until you start to rectify that with yourself, which is why you meet some people who now they're believers because of an experience they've had, and they rectify that by going with that part of the thinking, going, yes, I don't care, it changes my worldview, but now I believe in ghosts. For other people, they're still searching for that answer, going, I'm not sure what happened. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's me. I don't know if it's that, or there's something else. But yeah, even that's fascinating, trying to understand what's going on.
Yeah, well, I know people that have seen quite a few ghosts, and they still don't believe it. They think that there was some issue with their mind, that it can't be a ghost.
Yeah,
which I think is a very interesting way to look at it.
It is. And very difficult one too.
Yeah.
But it also taps into the whole the interesting role of belief in all of this as well. I mean, you said it earlier on in terms of, the psychology of it, and how the psychology can be really interesting. But the psychology of belief plays a huge factor. We know from a very simplistic point of view in psychology that your level of belief in the paranormal can affect your interpretation of quite mundane events. Even a breeze on the back of your neck can be interpreted by, 20 people in very, very different ways.
Yeah.
Somebody feeling that breeze on the back of their neck will go, I feel like there's a ghost that's just walked behind me, or there's a ghost that's breathed on my neck, or somebody else would be looking for the open window. And what is that breeze? But also context. So if you believe in the paranormal, that can affect your interpretation of things, but also where you are. If you're in an office building, you're more likely to be looking for the open window or the air conditioning unit, whereas if you're in a spooky looking castle, you're going to be looking for the ghost. You know. So you need to be aware of all of that stuff.
It's definitely interesting. I remember coming to work with you in 2015. I think we came to see you, and it must be. I think it was then. And we'd given you a video to watch and give some feedback on about the experiences that we had. And I remember one thing that you said to me. I was in, I think, Tudor World in Stratford-upon-Avon, and we were downstairs in the shop. And I said that I thought I felt a finger or a hand run down my back. And you gave me an amazing answer. I never even thought about it. It was something to do with like the skin follicles and moving it, and it creates a feeling of hands. And I thought that just blew my mind. I've always remembered that.
That's like, brilliant. Wow. But it is. But I do remember that. Yeah, I remember those video clips, Tudor World. But I also remember, talking about that feeling of kind of the brushing sensation that can happen and how that can be triggered. But also, there was something similar. Where was it? Mitchelham.
Priory.
Mitchelham Priory, yes.
Yeah.
Where somebody had a similar experience where again, they felt, it wasn't a breeze, but they felt the touching sensation on the back of their neck. And what was interesting, in the particular place that they were reporting it, there was high electrostatic field. You know, when you're walking along a particular carpet or you're rubbing against a balloon, you get that electrostatic.
Yeah.
You know, even very, very low levels of electrostatic can make the hairs on your skin go up. And by the sensation of the slowly rising of the hairs on your skin, that can create a sensation of being touched as well. You know, so even that experience you had in Tudor World, you can explain it one way, but then you can also explain it another way as well. And that's what I think is great about the detective work, in trying to understand experiences. But also for you, you know, you're very receptive to these other explanations. You know, sometimes when I talk to people about them, they completely just are not interested at all. They go, no, it's a ghost. You know, don't know what you're talking about. And I have more time for people like yourself who will take on the explanation and be intrigued by it and fascinated by it, and in some circumstances will therefore take that as a possible explanation for what happened. But also they may listen to the explanation and genuinely listen to it, but then still go, yes, you say that, but it still feels like it was a ghost. I have more time for that than I do for immediately dismissing a skeptical explanation, because, like I said, that's the two ends of the spectrum. If you're doing that, then you're being dogmatic. You're basically not listening to anything else. You know, you're so focused on it. But at least if you listen to some of these alternative explanations, you still think it's a ghost. Respect to you for thinking that. You know, I wasn't there when you had the experience, so fair enough.
I wouldn't say that whenever I'm out, I've had it quite a lot, you know, the feeling of being touched or back of my neck, like you say before. I wouldn't automatically say, oh, a ghost has just touched me. Now, there are lots of things that you know that I don't know, and your explanation was one of them. So for me, I'm like, oh, okay, then that's fair enough, because not everything's a ghost. You know, probably 1% of things that you experience is actually a ghost. I think the only thing that I could 100% say is a ghost if I saw it, because I would know the mindset of myself, whether I was tired, whether I was drunk, and if I was drunk, I wouldn't be there anyway. You know, the state of mind that I would have to be in would determine did I actually see that? If I'm walking around a building, if I'm sat there investigating, ready to see something, and something walks past me, in my mind, that's a ghost. You know, because if I'm not in the right mindset, then I would know that. I'd be thinking, oh, I'm feeling a bit drowsy, I'm feeling a bit sick, you know.
Yeah.
And that would explain it. But if I thought I was fine, for me, that would be a ghost if I saw that. Right. You know, maybe not the other experiences like being touched, certain sounds you could be, depends on where you are, you could hear things outside, you know. So, but my eyesight, for me, is my 100% believer. The other things are not. You know,
it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, quite early on, as a parapsychologist and a ghost hunter, I think people ask me what would convince you. I would say, I'd have to see a ghost to be convinced. And I think there's an element of that where you go, yes, personal experience, absolutely. You know, I'd need to see it.
Yeah.
I think, you know, my research now over the last 30 plus years, it's become so complex in terms of what the brain can do, and in terms of the eyes, and how much there's an interplay between the brain and the eyes, and how they can both play tricks on you, that for me to genuinely believe, I think I would have to see a ghost. It would have to be witnessed by somebody else.
Yeah.
And it would have to be filmed. And that's a high a high level for the ghost to achieve, you know, to do that. And I think I'm basically setting it up to fail, because I can't see that necessarily happening. I mean, that's the holy grail, to have multiple witnesses and for it to be filmed as well. I don't know if that would ever happen, but yeah, that's kind of where I am at the moment. But I think there's lots of people, you know, Danny, who I work with on some of the series, he's always said You know, that he's on a journey of discovery and trying to find out what's going on. But for him, if he saw a ghost, exactly like you said, Miki, if he saw a ghost, that would be it. And seeing a ghost, knowing that you're in the right state of mind as well.
Yeah,
And
that's
seeing
important.
a ghost, that you'd be convinced. Yeah, absolutely.
So working, obviously, Uncanny is massive. There's podcasts, the TV show. Was he a believer to begin with? Was he a skeptic? Did he want answers? What do
all
you
of
sort
that.
of
I think,
all of it?
Yeah, I think all of that. Danny and I go back 50, 20 years.
Wow.
We worked on a show on BBC Three called, I'm not sure if you're allowed to swear. I can swear, can't I?
Yeah.
Called The Bullshit Detectives, right? And every episode was a different episode looking at bullshit artists. And one episode was looking at mediums and, talking to the dead.
Yeah.
And Danny knew and had watched Most Haunted, and was a fan and did a spoof of Most Haunted at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival back in the day. And he contacted me saying, this is what I'm going to do. I'm doing this series and I want to do one on mediums, and this is one of your areas of expertise, so can I get you involved? And we basically set up a fake story for a non-haunted location. And we just had it buried on a website and then printed out a couple of leaflets in this location, and didn't tell the mediums where they were going to go, but said that they were going to be picked up at a train station and that it was a short walk from the train station. So it gave them a clue, but we didn't tell them exactly where it was. And the mediums turned up, and sure enough, they had done their research and they spouted out this story associated with the location, and it basically exposed them. But that was very early on, Danny and I working together, and it became very, very clear through that. But then he did this great, amazing podcast called Haunted, way before, years and years before Uncanny, that was effectively a forerunner of Uncanny, but it just didn't capture the imagination at the time, and it was on a few obscure platforms, so people didn't really know so much about it. But as part of that, the realization that I came to very quickly was that, like any of us, and referring to the two of us, but also colleagues in the field, on a journey of wanting to know what's going on, genuinely interested in ghosts, genuinely interested in knowing what they are, genuinely wanting to have an experience, wanting to be convinced that they're real. For anybody that saw Uncanny, the tour, he admits that his interest in all of this started from a very early experience that he had in his very early 20s, where he was lying on a bathroom floor and thought that he was dying, and he saw angels coming to get him, and just genuinely thought he was dying, and it was a panic attack. Something that's quite common, that people have it, but it gave him that kind of mortal fear of death, basically, and that started a journey of kind of almost not an avoidance of it, but a fascination with death. And Danny words it quite well when he says, and the fascination was effectively him almost reaching for what appeared to be evidence that we don't just die, and that there is something else afterwards. And it was almost comforting in a way. But by the same token, he's I would say more open than I am, but he's equally intrigued by the skeptical side of things. But that gives you a little bit of insight into where he's coming from in terms of his experiences.
Yeah, because obviously you've worked together for a long time with doing the Uncanny series in that, and I would have thought maybe hearing all these stories from people, their experiences, it must sway you a little bit to more of the belief side. so many people, different ages, different sexes, different race, different locations. They're all having similar experiences. It's no.
No, it doesn't sway me at all.
Okay.
It makes me more sympathetic, more empathic to people's experiences, and the empathy comes from being in haunted houses myself, but a lot of these people that write in about their stories in Uncanny are writing in about stories in the real world, in places that are not big haunted castles and that sort of thing. They're just, normal places, day-to-day houses and various other things. So there's that. But the reason why I shake my head like that is because as a psychologist, I could say, it's the same sort of thing. I could say millions of people experience fear. Millions of people experience anxiety. Millions of people experience love. These are all emotions. Intangible things that are there that you can't capture, but they're psychological, but also your brain reacts in a particular way, but also your body reacts in a particular way. We know, for example, and I've done it myself with lab experiments where I've taken people through virtual reality haunted houses. We know that there are the triangle of physical or physiological reactions: your heart rate, your lung capacity, and there's something called your electrodermal activity. And your electrodermal activity is basically your sweat response to circumstances. So we may not realize, but all the time we're sweating. I don't mean going to the gym type sweat, but at a micro level it's happening on our skin. And so you can have these, they're called conductors, that attach to your fingers, and they can tell when you're sweating more than not. And it's called your electrodermal activity. And so you can measure fear by looking at your heart rate, your lung capacity, and your electrodermal activity, and it gives you a very clear indication that you're fearful of something. And that's what I mean. You said, well, surely, it sways me more to believing because all of these people are having these ghostly experiences, and they're all, there's commonalities between them. And that is intriguing in itself, that there are commonalities between them. From Elton's phone and picking up a toy phone and getting a weird experience to, room 9, 611 or whatever it was, the first one we did for the story from Belfast. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. There are themes that run through them. But like I said, it doesn't make me any more of a believer, because I know that millions of people have fearful reaction to situations. They are anxious in situations. People get very, very stressed, and that can affect their perception. I know, because of research, millions of people are affected by, hypnagogic experiences as people fall asleep or as they wake up and they have a hypnopompic experience. So that's what I mean. But the lovely thing about all of these experiences and hearing all of these stories in Uncanny is the very exciting realization that people are still having these experiences. And again, as scientists, but also as ghost hunters, it's arrogant of us to ignore them. We've still got to listen to them. We've still got to try and understand what's going on, because, as knowledgeable as I might sound about all of this, we still don't really know what's going on. We don't really know what's going on.
No, we don't. No. And until we can actually define what a ghost is, whether on an electromagnetic level, because obviously people say that EMF is created when a spirit is near. How do we know that? Until we get like a basic standard for everything associated with a ghost, like you say, I don't think we'll ever be able to define or science to confirm a spirit or a ghost.
But it's also skeptics similar to myself, will put forward the idea. You mentioned about electromagnetic fields and ghosts creating it or affecting it in some way. But from a skeptical point of view, Skeptics will say, look, electromagnetic fields can affect your brain in such a way to make you
Yes,
hallucinate.
definitely. Yeah.
Or infrasound can affect you in such a way to give you a spooky experience, and
Oh, I hate
you
that.
you interpret that as
Yeah.
paranormal. You know, they'll say that, but that's the interesting thing, is that as scientists, we also cannot ignore people's experiences. But if a skeptic, including myself, stands up and says, the explanation for that might be this, we've equally got to say, well, where's the evidence for that explanation? Where's the evidence for EMF fields affecting your brain or infrasound affecting you? And I published a paper about 3 or 4 years ago in a worldwide journal called Frontiers in Psychology, which has about a reach of about 85 million plus readers. I mean, it's a huge scientific journal. We published it there so that it would get the attention of scientists and skeptics, because effectively what we were doing was looking at the evidence for electromagnetic fields affecting your brain and causing ghostly experiences, or infrasound affecting you in such a way that you think you're having ghostly experiences, or humidity levels affecting you in such a way that you think you're having a ghostly experience. We looked at all of that evidence. The scientific evidence for that stuff is just not there. It's not there.
Oh, wow.
Even though we talk about it as skeptics,
the
evidence is not there. And the reason why is because if we are being truly scientific about it and we are questioning people's ghostly experiences on the basis of lack of evidence, on the basis of, it could be psychology, it could be environment, we should be applying the same skeptical scrutiny to the skeptical arguments. And once you start to look at them, you realize, yes, there are some studies about EMF affecting your brain, there are some studies about infrasound, but actually the scientific evidence is not strong. It's only really within the last 10 to 15 years that you have some of this evidence. We need another 10 years of studies in both of those areas for us to be sure that it is either affecting us or it's not. The actual evidence isn't there. So, yeah, that paper was called Things That Go Bump in the Literature. Lovely title. So people can easily, you just type that into Google, Things That Go Bump in the Literature, and you will find that. Yeah, you'll find that paper, or I've got it linked from my social media accounts. But I encourage people to read it, and if all of the science stuff kind of makes your eyes go blurry, go straight to the discussion and the conclusion at the end, where we say exactly that. You know, that the evidence is just not there for some of these skeptical explanations.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a great read after.
It's a bit of a scoop for you there, isn't it?
There you go. Yeah, everybody
go.
Go check it out.
Skeptic being skeptical about the skeptics.
Yeah, you're on our side. Yay.
I'll come to the dark side eventually.
So, obviously, people know you originally from Most Haunted. How did that come about? How did you get invited onto this show?
Wow, that takes me back.
Yeah.
I was a parapsychologist before Most Haunted. I was employed up at a university in Liverpool, doing parapsychology and also the investigative and forensic stuff as well. But yeah, mainly parapsychology. And it came about because there was a colleague of mine, Dr. Matthew Smith, that was on the show Most Haunted. And he was at the same university that I was. And he said to me, it was coming up to, I think it was some life event in the family, either his wife was giving birth or something, but it was getting very close to a point where he was going, he may not be able to do 1 or 2 of the episodes. And his role, as people remember back to those early series, was sitting in a studio looking at footage and commenting on it.
Yeah.
And giving the skeptical explanation. And so he said, would I be able to cover for him occasionally? And I did that. There were a few episodes that I did. One of the first ones that I did was way back. I think it was a live that was at King's Cross Station, I think was one of the early ones that I did. But there were some that he couldn't do. So I did them. And then there were a few of them that he did and a few of them that I did. And, we kind of shared them. And then Carl and Yvette and so that's how I met Carl and Yvette, and that's how I became involved in Most Haunted, but only a few episodes.
Yeah.
And they asked us if we wanted to go on a ghost hunt with them on Most Haunted, like actually become part of the team, like Phil Wyman was doing at the time.
Yeah.
And of course, they asked Matthew first because it was his gig. They asked him if he wanted to come on, and it was around that time that Phil left the show, so they were looking at possibilities of what could happen. Matthew went along to an investigation of Croxteth Hall in Liverpool with them.
Yeah.
Again, I encourage people to watch that episode because Matthew almost wets himself when there's a big bang from above. But yeah, he came out of that and he said, it's not for me. He was involved in parapsychology the same way I was. His area of specialty was around psychokinesis and precognition within the lab. It wasn't really ghostly stuff.
Okay.
But and so then they asked me if I would be interested, and Matthew graciously said, yeah, definitely ask Ciaran, because his thing is ghosts, and it always has been ghosts and ghostly experiences. And so the first episode that I was actually part of was the Black Swan in Devizes in Wiltshire, and it was an episode where Uri Geller was a guest.
Ah, yes, yeah, I remember that one.
And so I hadn't actually joined the team at that point, but I jumped at the chance because Uri Geller was there. So that was my first ever investigation with Most Haunted. I enjoyed it, and over dinner, Carl had asked me if I'd like to join the team, and I still wasn't sure at that point, to be honest. I was working in a university. This was very alien territory to me, to be doing this sort of thing as well. So I wasn't sure, but they invited me along they were going to do some investigations in Holland. So Castle Dorwith and another one.
I remember those, yeah.
So they did 2 in Holland, and then they went over and did Kinnety Castle and Castle Leslie in Ireland. And they invited me over for those. And again, I still wasn't actually part of the team then. I was still kind of a guest investigator. But I loved it. And I think it was Kinnety Castle and Castle Leslie that turned me, because they're such fascinating places anyway. And having access to those locations and kind of seeing what was going on, but also being able to solve some of the hauntings as well live, I think was really exciting. And so, so we came back from there, and Derby Live was not long after that, and they announced that I was part of the team.
Wow.
So, so there you go.
How long were you on there for? How many series was it? If you can remember.
I can't remember exactly. I think it was about 6 or 7
Yeah, I could say
series.
it was a lot, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was about 7 series. Finished in 2010, spring 2010. We did a live in Prague, and that was kind of the finish of Most Haunted on Living TV and the old crew.
Yeah.
Carl and Yvette carried on doing Most Haunted, and they did that with a slightly changed crew, and they did it independently and then sold it Really Channel as well, and various things. But my last involvement was spring 2010. But it's about 7 episodes, and of course all of the lives, and which are totally different filming experience, and then the lives in America as well. We did lives in America, we did lives in Italy as well, all over the place. I mean, it was just amazing experience. Amazing.
I don't know. Were you there for the Pendle Hill episode, the lives at Pendle
Certainly
Hill?
was. Yes, I was. That was amazing.
Yeah,
that was absolutely amazing. That was Tyndale Farm.
Yes.
Yeah. And people forget, when you ask people about Pendle Farm, they just go, "Oh yeah, that Pendle Hill." They go, "Oh yeah, that was a Halloween live." And it was the last night, and you're in the and I went, "No, it wasn't the last night. It was the second night. Yeah. It was a 3-night live. That was the second night that everybody remembers."
Everyone was dropping like flies, weren't they?
Seriously dropping like flies. And I remember it vividly, and I have the recording of it saved on my laptop, because I keep refreshing my memory of it. But effectively we all were in there, and then the first thing that happened was the sound man. he started to have difficulty catching his breath.
Yeah.
And there'd been all of this narrative building up about the witches being hung.
Them dyke and
Yeah, and so he felt he felt his throat tighten and he couldn't breathe, and so he was taken out and his kit was left inside, and then it was Stuart. Stuart felt like he couldn't breathe as well. He was taken outside. The two of them outside. It was really, anybody that watches it, it's really dramatic and quite scary that it happened to them so quickly. Went outside to the paramedics. When they came back in, Kath started to panic, didn't know what was going on, and she's just like, what is going on? These two guys. And she lost the feeling in her legs, and it looked like she had fainted, basically, and she was carried out by one of the security guards. They carried on doing the glass. It was glass moving, and then they were moving the table as well. And at that point, the cameraman, there are various alternate accounts of what happened, but I'll tell you what happened. Is the cameraman, he stepped back and he hit his head on a shelf behind him, but of course in the excitement of everything that happened and the scariness of everything that happened, he thought something had touched him on the back of the head, and he literally collapsed, and he collapsed, hitting the table and dropping the camera down on the table, and there was just dead air. It was just black, completely black. And it's one of the most, talked about in historical moments in Most Haunted, that literally for 3 or 4 seconds it was a black screen, which is a big no-no in television. You just never do that.
No, definitely.
Because it spontaneously happened. They cut back to the studio, and Dave Bull, who was the presenter, was there, and he was going, and I'm being told that we've lost the crew, we've lost the camera, we don't know what's going on, we'll try and get back to them as quickly as possible. And then they turned to somebody on the sofa and said, well, what do you think's going on? And it was all a little bit of discussion. He goes, right, I think we can go back. And they came back, and in that interim, some other people had gone out because they felt sick and couldn't breathe. And it literally was, we had about 10 people in that room. When you're doing a live show, there's a lot more people than you see.
Yeah.
Because there's riggers, there's people responsible for the relaying to the satellite, there's
floor managers, all that.
Floor managers. I mean, it's quite, you know it quite well.
It's
the live quite complex
stuff,
in terms of the live stuff. So we had about 10 people. When they came back to us, it was Yvette, myself, and the floor manager. There's 3 of us left. That was it. And that's, why it was such a significant moment, because genuinely, regardless of how you feel about it, people were being taken out of that room because they felt weak or they felt overcome, or whether you think it's the witches or whatever it was. It doesn't matter what it was. I said it on the night, I think, that it was like being a medic in a battlefield. You just didn't know where to look. You didn't know what to do. People were dropping like flies.
To go to next, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What's going to happen next? And that was the most amazing and unbelievable thing, is in a lot of people's memory, they go, yeah, that night. And they think it's the last night because it was such a big deal. But it was the second night. We then had to go on and film the third night. We were all absolutely shattered.
Yeah, I can imagine. I bet emotionally they were drained.
Oh, completely.
Just from whether what happened or what they thought had happened to them. It's just going to play a big part of your mind, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Regardless of what you think has happened, something has happened that has never happened before, and is difficult to explain. I mean, it's not necessarily so difficult for me as a psychologist, but when you're in the middle of it and things are genuinely happening to you. So some people were genuinely physically affected, and it just knocks you sideways. So people were genuinely exhausted by it. And, we even had a follow-up episode some years later where they interviewed all of the crew, and you could tell the emotion in people's voices. You could still hear that as they recollected what happened that particular night. It was bizarre. Very bizarre.
Game changer of an episode, that one.
Yeah, big time.
Wow. So, obviously you were on the show, and I've worked with Carl and Stuart before. I take it... How do I word this without... Don't worry. So, obviously you're looking at it from a parapsychological point of view. You want everything to be real. Was there anything that you saw that was not true? If you can answer, if you want to answer.
Anything I saw
that was staged, or...
Oh, I see what you mean. Oh, in that
Yeah.
respect. Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much I would say I don't think people would be surprised by the fact that when I was looking at and kind of commenting on the phenomena, that I thought, a lot of it was set up. I don't mean set up in the sense that it was scripted or that...
No.
There was definitely not that. It was more so that, I was commenting about the psychology of what was going on, or about kind of other explanations for it. But certainly, there was some phenomena there where you just look and go, it feels as though there's an element of responding to the camera, feeling as though phenomena has to happen at this point. And the way I explain it best, I think, is whilst it's a genuine televised investigation of haunted properties, it is. People tend to forget that we were genuinely in these investigated properties, into these haunted properties overnight. There is also an element of thinking about it from a TV perspective and as a producer. What are you going to do? So Kath and myself sitting in a dining room in a haunted castle doing a vigil for an hour when nothing happens. Genuinely nothing happens. Are you going to show that for an hour?
Nope.
Or for the 50 minutes that it's on screen, are you going to show, scream, bang, people fainting? Are you going to show the excitement? Because from a producer's point of view, you think that's what people want to see. And that's what I mean by people forget that over the course of an investigation, there would be multiple hours of stuff where nothing happened. But then there'd be other hours where things happen, and then it's down to your interpretation. Sometimes it would be psychology, sometimes it would be the environment, sometimes it would be circumstances where people, I think, were looking and going, something has to happen. So let's make it happen. Or particular members of the crew going, I'm going to go down into some deep dark hole now and let's see what happens. And the expectation is, well, something's bound to happen because you want it to happen. You're going down this deep dark hole. I never saw, it's related to that. I never saw any fakery. Let's put it that way, which is the other way of putting it. But I definitely felt, if anything, I felt for the crew in some circumstances where things weren't happening.
Because we've all been there.
Because you could almost feel the pressure, and even especially on a live show where the pressure of a camera in your face and then millions watching at home, and then people thinking, oh, something should happen, and they feel pressured to go, oh, I feel a bit strange, or I feel like there's something there, And there's psychology in that too. There's psychology in the performance and psychology in being in a haunted environment, but being on television as well. So, but never witnessed anything. But I think also that's probably not surprising anyway. Because I was in a role which was very much a skeptical role as a parapsychologist, and a lot of the stuff. And a lot of the most convincing stuff that would be happening on vigils that I wouldn't necessarily be part of. And even when I was, so for example, there was lots of phenomena that was focused around seance tables, sitting around doing a seance, sitting around a table, and there being loud banging in response to questions and that sort of stuff. And I frequently ask Ciaran, what do you think of that? And I go, well, it's interesting, but I don't think it's paranormal. Oh, come on, Ciaran, this is amazing communication. You must think it is. Well, if everybody takes their shoes and socks off and we put a camera underneath, then I'll be convinced.
I know a story about a certain member that had something in his shoe. That's all I'm going to say.
but you're also you're also raising that skeptical perspective that has plagued psychical research for 120 years. You look at some of the early spiritualists who would sit around a seance table, and individuals like Houdini who would basically saying exactly the same thing: take your shoes and socks off, and if the banging continues, the knocking sound continues, then I'll be convinced. And I would be saying the same thing. Did it ever happen? Did it ever take their shoes and socks off? No.
Of course it wouldn't.
No. So, yeah.
Is there any, obviously over the years, we've had the Enfield poltergeist, we've had the East Drive one, the Battersea poltergeist. Is there any case, whether it be in this country, in America, like with the Exorcist house, with the original story comes from, is there a case that you'd like to have worked on or been involved with?
Oh, that's an amazing question that I've never been asked before in my life.
Hey.
That's a real first, and wow, that is amazing. I think there are a number of different cases, but I'm going to build up to a ghostly one. But there are some other cases in the paranormal that I would like to have been part of.
Okay.
So, I would go back to June 1947 and the witnessing of the flying saucers around Mount Rainier. So this is a few months before Roswell.
Oh, wow.
But this is a few months before then, but this was an airline pilot that witnessed shapes moving, and he described them as like saucers skipping off the water. And that was a turning point in ufology history, because that was where we got the term flying saucers from. I would love to have been there at that particular point, because that was a turning point. It's from there that we then get all of the sightings, the UFO sightings from that June 1947. We had Roswell a month or two later. A few years after that, we got the UFO invasion of Washington, D.C. that President Truman himself was, investigating.
Yeah.
All of these amazing UFOs. So that's one, but that's not a ghostly one. But I'm fascinated by ufology. So that would be a key case, June 1947. I'm also fascinated by other weird paranormal stuff, so cryptozoology, which is not part of parapsychology, and there's no scientific way of looking at it, but I would love to have been involved in a Bigfoot investigation, and still hope that I will do one day. So that's one.
Definitely.
You asked me about a case that I would love to have been involved in and to be part of the investigation. I think it would have to be Borley Rectory.
Oh, that's it. I was just about to say that. I forgot that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would have to be Borley Rectory. Just because, you asked me about, if you were to ask me about individuals I admire, or kind of, stuff that's influenced me, Harry Price would be a big one. And Harry Price was the key investigator in Borley Rectory, but also that's an investigation that has gone down. I was going to say folklore, that's not right. It's kind of gone down in the history of ghost lore, LORE, in terms of the influence that's had. And when you look at Harry Price's writings and the most haunted house in England, and it being Borley Rectory, all of that, and also the controversy about whether it was real or not. But also what was amazing that Harry Price did that you just don't see now is when he realized there was an investigation to be done, for whatever his reason were, he put that advert in the Times calling for investigators to come and investigate Borley Rectory with him for a year, to live there for a year.
Yes,
and that's
please.
what they would be doing, investigating. And you just
Wow.
think, that is amazing. I mean, the amount of information, the amount of data you get, the potential in terms of experiences. It's not just a one-night affair. You're there for an entire year. And it's absolutely fascinating. And Borley Rectory, I did get very close to investigating there. We know it's burnt down now, but I did get very close to investigating there, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying so. But with Richard Felix from Most Haunted.
Yeah.
And it's a little known fact. We haven't talked about this, but Richard and I did a lot of investigating of Harry Price about 7 or 8 years ago. We a little bit longer than that, over 10 years ago actually. And we followed in the footsteps of Harry Price for a lot of the stuff that he did in the UK. So we followed up. We did Talking Mongoose on the Isle of Man, for example. We went and investigated that case.
Yeah.
And we went to Borley Rectory, and we're at the Borley Church, and we talked to various people in the village of Borley. And then we were looking at the floor plans of Borley Rectory that we have, and I still have to this day. We're looking at where it would be in the village. And we said, well, that building there is built over it now, but over there on the left-hand side where there's still part of the Borley building we could see on the plan, but the building's not there, but those new bungalows are there as you drive towards. So we walked over to this first bungalow thinking, well, that's on the grounds of where Borley Rectory is. Walked over there, we just knocked on the door. I don't know why, but we just thought, well, let's knock on the door, ask if they've experienced anything weird. I mean, it's a highly unethical thing to do, but we knocked on the door. The lady opened. She said, oh, hello, Richard. Hello, Ciaran. I wondered when you'd get here.
Wow.
Like, what? What are you talking about? She said, well, our bungalow's built on the grounds of Borley Rectory. We thought that one day one of you is going to pop by and ask us about it. Come in for a cup of tea.
Wow. That's
so
awesome.
We went into the bungalow, and there's this amazing story associated with Borley Rectory and Harry Price and the investigation for an area of Borley Rectory called the Nun's Walk, where a nun is seen on a particular night in the year. And so we're having this cup of tea, and we say, well, just, have had any weird thing? No, not really, but the Nun's Walk is in our back garden. We went, what? What are you talking about? So literally we went out into the back garden, and the Nun's Walk that went from Borley Rectory to kind of the entrance of the village of Borley is still there, and it goes along the back gardens of all of those bungalows.
That's the most famous bit. Wow.
It is just absolutely phenomenal. So fast forward about 3 or 4 months, and I went there on an investigation with Steve Parsons and his Parascience group, and Richard Felix and a few select others, and we did overnight vigil. We basically put the couple up who were living in the bungalow in a hotel nearby, and they gave us their bungalow for the night, and we investigated the back garden and Nun's Walk, and amazing. That's the closest I've got to investigating Borley Rectory. And of course the funny thing was, a little postscript, about a year later, the owner of the bungalows called us up and said, he said, you might want to come and look at this. He said, I've just been doing an extension at the back of the house, doing a sun lounge, and of course I had to dig very deeply to put the foundations in, and he said, I've come across all of these old bricks. And of course we went there, and it was literally, he dug up half of his back garden to build this sun lounge extension onto the bungalow, and it was literally a pit of old bricks, which absolutely, from the rectory itself.
Wow.
Madness.
That's like the holy grail of locations.
Yeah, seriously. Seriously, amazing, absolutely amazing. But I'd love to have been there. Back when they did the investigation, that would have just been something else to be part of that. So,
So definitely. Is it, to tie in with that, is there any stories that you think possibly that have been exaggerated, not true? Because a lot of people say Enfield was falsified by Janet. Is there any story that you think from your...
What do you mean, from Borley, you mean? Or
No, from, like the Enfield poltergeist, a lot of people said that it was fabricated, it wasn't true, the haunting wasn't real. Is there any from your parapsychology side that you would sort of agree on, or?
Oh, you mean in terms of any cases, any well-known cases that I think?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, absolutely. I think the Amityville house is a classic.
Amityville, yeah.
Classic case of a misunderstood history, and the thought,
the money,
was
films,
the whole Lutz family and their association with it, and just, yeah, absolutely. And then of course what you get is the Lutz family and them kind of their involvement, but then you get Ed and Lorraine Warren's involvement,
In
and a
everything.
number of different people, and then it just becomes demons and demonic and everything, and it's just 100%. You look actually at the Amityville case and you just think, yeah, it doesn't feel like there's any substance to that at all in
No,
terms of any experiences that are reported.
it seems that it's just a made-up Hollywood story for films and books. Obviously,
But also, there's a sense of exaggeration with the Warrens anyway, and sensationalism that happens with the Warrens.
Yeah.
You look at the account of their involvement in the Enfield poltergeist, for example, and it makes it sound like, in terms of the written account of their involvement, it makes it sound like they were investigators of the Enfield poltergeist. And I know that has been distorted to a great extent with The Conjuring 2, James Wan's film, but you kind of are almost accepting of Hollywood and its license to be sensationalistic. It's a piece of fiction, basically, but it's built on and it's developed from the account of their involvement in the investigation. Now, if you look at the writings, you go to the SPR, Society for Psychical Research library in London, and you'll find the letters of correspondence between Ed Warren and Ghislaine Playfair and Maurice Grosse. And Ed and Lorraine Warren, they were at Enfield. They were, but they were probably there less than 24 hours, just a day.
I was going to say,
no longer than that, but certainly not enough for them to claim to be investigators of the Enfield poltergeist at all. And of course, there's also an interesting letter that you can find quite easily, actually, because I think it's been published online now, from Maurice Grosse, summarising the visit that Ed and Lorraine had, and how he had was shocked, amazed, surprised, but also had a slight chuckle at their theory that the Enfield poltergeist had been caused by a demon. All the phenomena, which of course is typical in terms of what they did. So them having a stamp on Amityville, but also Enfield, also always leaves me with a little bit of suspicion.
Unfortunately, that's what people, the new level of ghost hunters, they see the TV shows, they see the YouTube Americans, they see the Hollywood films, and they think it's all real. Unfortunately,
yes. Yeah.
And their viewpoint of the paranormal is very much deluded.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, nothing really happens.
No, exactly, and I think you're absolutely right, and I think there's a danger. So I'm a big horror fan, and even though I was saying about Conjuring 2 being sensationalistic, I love the Conjuring films. I think James Wan as a director is brilliant. But all you need to do is put, this is based on a true story, and people think, oh, the whole thing is real.
It's real,
no. It's based on the fact there was a case called the Enfield poltergeist, and Ed and Lorraine Warren visited there for one day. The rest of it is not, but it's based on a true story. But you're right, there's that gullibility of just thinking that it's all true, and that's how investigations are happening. But I did a talk the other week, and somebody asked in the audience, said, what do you think about all the paranormal shows, the ghost hunting shows? Do you think they have been a positive or negative influence on people? Do you think they're good or do you think they're bad? And I think it's both. I think they're good or bad. But what you just said, I think, is actually the positive side and also the negative. And I'll explain why. I think the negative side is, you're right, when people watch ghost hunting shows, especially in North America, they think that's it. And that's what happens. And they think that's what ghost hunting is. And every knock, every breeze, every slight whisper is down to a demon, for example. There's lots of shows that perpetuate that idea. But also, they think that ghost hunting is you walk into a place and everything kicks off. So that's the negative. The The positive is, and I think this genuinely is a positive because otherwise you and I wouldn't be here. The positive is people watching ghost hunting shows, and thinking the people that are doing that are ordinary and normal people. They're plumbers or they're cameramen or they're sound, it doesn't matter. Those are normal people I'm going to go and do it. And that's the good thing. Why? Because when people go and do it for themselves, they realize it's nothing like the TV shows. And I think that's a positive. They're finding out for themselves. And then it takes a particular kind of mindset and a particular sort of interest and passion for you to continue with it. Because as we all know, sometimes ghost hunting is like watching paint dry. You can be sat in a location and it is tough. Nothing will happen for the longest time, and sometimes the biggest challenge on ghost hunting is staying awake, especially if it's a nighttime thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a positive. I think that is a positive. I think the other negative, though, is what I call the most haunted effect. And there's actually a PhD guy down in Winchester did a PhD on it, the most haunted effect, which is that when I was about 16, 17 years old, I went to the Hellfire Caves in West Wickham because I was living in the area. And I said to them, would it be okay to come along and do an investigation? I was doing an investigation of the mausoleum, and I wanted to come in and do an investigation of Hellfire Caves. They said to me, how much will it cost us for you to come and do the investigation? They said to me, when I was 16, how much will it cost us as Hellfire Caves for you to come and do the investigation? Now, when you go and do an investigation, it can cost anything up to £1,000 or more. And that's the most haunted effect. When Most Haunted became very popular, there were locations that if they featured on the show, they would immediately be able to start charging ghost hunters to go and do ghost hunting. And I think that's another negative, which is the cost. I think there's a positive there, which is a lot of these locations were not available to ghost hunters before that. And by opening them up to ghost hunters, I think that's also a positive. So that's what I mean. I think there's negatives and positives for ghost shows.
Yeah. Following on from that, I've worked with Phil and Sarah Wyman on Are You Haunted, a couple of series fantastic. Now. And they obviously don't go to the big famous locations. No. They try and do the local ones that people haven't really done. And a couple of them that we've been to, they're like local town halls, and you get the whole building. And a lot of these locations, the small amount of money, because it's not thousands like these big locations charge, the small amount of money that they do get for the hire, it could save them a month's wages, And if they get a couple of them in the year, it makes a massive difference.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's another positive on ghost hunting. I mean, any location can be opened up to investigate. They don't have to be haunted. They don't have to say they're haunted. But if you want to hire it to help them out and to record a video or just to go and experience, I think that's great. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's another way. It's almost like supporting, like you said, it's supporting your local locations, isn't it? Or supporting local places that otherwise wouldn't get visitors or be able to raise money in a particular way. It's lovely to hear as well that you'd be working with Phil and Sarah. Have a lot of time. Phil and Sarah and Jane. They're just a lovely couple. Yes.
And Jane. Don't forget Jane.
Yes. Don't forget Jane. No, but they're an amazing couple. Amazing couple. A lot of time for them.
Yeah, they're lovely. So just a couple more questions.
Okay.
What is your favourite location that you've been to date so far?
Wow. I would say Moundsville Penitentiary. So the people know it as West Virginia State Penitentiary. Yeah, but it's also called Moundsville. In America, they have these penitentiaries that are these prisons, call them penitentiaries. They are just absolutely vast, enormous places. Eastern State Penitentiary is perhaps the most well-known one in Philadelphia. Vast. I mean, it takes you 20, 30 minutes to walk from one end to the other. They're just enormous places. And Moundsville, or West Virginia State Penitentiary, is the same. But yeah, fascinating in terms of the location, in terms of experiences, and just being there felt like a privilege. I was only there once though, so I'd love to go back there. So that would be, that's in my top 10. One in the UK is Hampton Court Palace. As a location, I have been there now 40, 50 times. And I was lucky enough about 25 years ago to live there for 2 weeks as part of a university team investigating Hampton Court Palace. I mean, it was amazing. It makes it sound glamorous, but basically there are some empty cottages as you go into the palace on the left-hand side of the driveway, and they are basically empty. So we had mattresses on the floor. It wasn't as glamorous as it sounds, but still, imagine the scenario as a ghost hunter and as a parapsychologist living in Hampton Court Palace. So once we had done kind of the psychology experiments that we were doing in the investigation, I was then able to walk around the palace with the overnight security team and get to see the palace at night with nobody else there and get to investigate it. And it's amazing. And it's amazing because of its history, but also there are about 300 years of documented ghostly experiences. So there's a curator there who gathered the accounts from people that have stayed at Hampton Court Palace, who filled out visitors' books, but also they have kept their own diaries, or they went back home and filled out the diary. And he has collated all of those experiences over 300, for over 300 years of documented ghostly experiences in Hampton Court Palace, which is just absolutely amazing. So yeah, so I would say those are definitely in my top 2. And then of course there's the bucket list ones I haven't investigated. Tower of London, that would be one. Would love to do Tower of London. Would also love to do Bacor Hill Station in Cambodia, which is Bacor Hill National Park, which is an entire village.
Okay, never heard of that one.
Yeah, built during the Troubles, and an amazing location. If people have seen the Korean film R Point, it's a ghost film about a small army that they basically go through Bacor Hill Station. They start to have ghostly experiences. Now that's a work of fiction, but actually as a haunted place, it's a genuine haunted place. It's been abandoned now for about 80 years. Oh, wow. Stunning place. So yeah, there you go.
Oh wow. So what plans do you have for Halloween? Obviously Halloween is virtually here. What's on the agenda for Ciaran?
I've got loads of things on the agenda. I guess the biggest scoop, which I don't mind sharing with you, is that we are currently filming Uncanny Series 2. So nice. That's for BBC Two. So there's an Uncanny Series 1, of course, which came out on BBC Two. We're currently filming Series 2, which means it'll come out in January and February. So that's one Halloween thing that we're doing this end of October. On the 2nd, towards the 2nd of November, the end of Oxford Castle, investigating Oxford Castle. That's an exciting one. Halloween Day and Halloween evening, I am keeping free because I have tended to do that for the last few years. About 3 years ago, I used to do investigation of Hever Castle every year. Halloween, Hever Castle, brilliant location.
My mum and dad had just come back from there.
Oh,
last
really?
Week. Yeah.
Amazing place. Yeah. Absolutely amazing place. An amazing history, and Anne Boleyn haunts that. And just, phenomenal. Amazing ghost stories associated with it. But yeah, I used to do investigations there, but I've got 3 young children, 6, 9 and 10. They now love the fact that their dad is a Ghostbuster. They love it. And so for the last 2 to 3 years, I have kept Halloween evening free so we can go trick-or-treating with their dad as a Ghostbuster, basically.
I used to do that with my kids. I used to dress up. One year I was Pennywise. The other year I was the nun. I had full costume, head to toe. And I just walk around with my coffee, and the kids would go knocking on the doors, all in full costume. Fantastic. I loved it. That was awesome.
Absolutely love it. It's brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah, so on the 9th of November you are going to George Jarvis I believe.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I am. Yes,
With Richard
with Richard.
Felix.
Yeah, as part of a spectacular event. Yeah, we're at the George Jarvis School with Richard Felix, and I mentioned Richard earlier about the investigations we did of Harry Price. Richard and I have not investigated together since 2010. So it's been 14 years since we've investigated together. So that is quite an event.
Was
It
that
will be absolutely amazing.
on Most Haunted or at the Borley bungalow?
No, the bungalow was before 2010, I think.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I think it was 2010. Yeah, it was before 2010. Might have been 2009, 2008. But yeah, the last time we investigated together would have been Prague.
Oh, I
in
see.
2010
On the live.
on that live show.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've seen
wow.
each other once or twice since then, in passing on when Richard did a ghost walk. I think there was another event that happened, but it wasn't a ghost investigation. So yeah, so it's been at least 8 years since Richard and I have been together, actually seen each other, but also been on an investigation. So it's a big deal. Be amazing.
Catch up. Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, my first ghost hunt was actually with Richard Felix in the Golden Fleece in York. Yeah,
wow. There's
my first one. Yeah, 2008 that was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is an amazing venue. That's on the most haunted map, isn't it? I don't mean most haunted the show, but when we talk to ghost hunters about the most haunted map, i.e. what are the locations that are on that map that you must do as a ghost hunter, in the Golden Fleece is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm actually joining you at George Jarvis. So I'll be going to that
amazing.
Event. Yeah. I saw you both there and I thought, that's it, I'm going. Because Phil and Sarah have always said to me, George Jarvis, best location they've been to. So much activity, and I've never had the chance to go. And I saw that pop up, and you two were there, and I thought, right, that's it. That's a no-brainer.
amazing location.
Yeah,
absolutely amazing. And I have been in that school, in the pits. You'll see it. There's a kind of a dungeon area, kind of a basement area of that.
Yeah.
Hearing somebody walk around above us, and being able to then go out and walkie-talkie people and go. The nearest people are 4 floors up, three floors up. There's no way there could be somebody walking around above us. It's a great place. Amazing. You're going to love it. Oh, that's brilliant. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. And my last question, if you could get rid of something in the paranormal, what would it be? It's gone forever.
K2. K2. It would have to be a K2. Yes, 100%.
Any reason for that?
Well, I say that with a slight wry smile because there's a certain amount of affection that I have for the K2 because I call it my disco EMF meter. But I think the K2 has been responsible for a lot of misinterpretation about EMF, electromagnetic fields, and what they can do. The K2 as a meter, I think people, even ghost hunters now who are critical of EMFs, look at the K2 and they go, it's rubbish. Actually, it's not rubbish. It is quite the opposite. It can actually detect stuff from a long way away, and that's what makes it rubbish. It's not that it can't do its job. So you can have a K2 that can even be affected by a plane flying overhead.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Or a taxi driving completely outside of the property can be picked up by that K2 meter. And that's the problem then, because of course the lights go off and people go, oh, that's amazing. And you could be a derelict property where there's no electricity around and it'll go off and people go, wow, how can you explain that? Well, we don't know that there wasn't something that went past with a walkie-talkie or somebody with their phone. Yeah, if I could get rid of the K2, make my job so much easier.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Ciaran.
No, my absolute pleasure. It's been brilliant chatting with you. Great to see you again.
Definitely. If you'd just like to let people know how they can get in contact with you for any spooky reasons.
Yeah, if people want to get in touch with me, they can find me. I'm quite active on social media, so through Twitter, at Ciaran O'Keeffe is my Twitter handle. Also, if you type in Linktree and then Ciaran O'Keeffe as well into Google or any search engine, you basically find a list of everything that I do. It has access to all of my scientific research articles, has access to Uncanny, Battersea Poltergeist, any kind of updates, things that I'm doing. I've got an online school as well where I do parapsychology and kind of various courses as well, and all of that is linked through that. So yeah, check it out, Linktree, and it's Ciaran O'Keeffe, or check me out on Twitter at Ciaran O'Keeffe.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Ciaran, again. It's been such a pleasure and an honour to share Halloween with you.
Yes, happy Halloween, spooky times. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. No, lovely to chat with you, Miki. Lovely to see you again, and see you at George Jarvis.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Ciaran. I'll see you in a bit. There we go, guys. Wow, what a Halloween treat we had for you tonight. Ciaran is so knowledgeable, awesome guy. Do what he said. Go and check out his website. Go enroll in a course at the university. I'm sure you will learn so much. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. It's been a pleasure to be here with you again. Thank you so much for the recent subscribers, the feedback, the comments, the likes. You guys are awesome. And all I can say is happy Halloween. Behave yourselves. And I'll see you next week with another awesome guest. See you later.